Okay, so b'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to jump back into Sichos HaRan. We are, believe it or not, up to Sichos HaRan Samach already, which is really amazing, I think. Chazei Hashem, we really covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of ground still to cover. There are 308 entries in Sichos HaRan, and b'siyata d'shmaya, we'll get to all of them. But for today, we have a pretty lengthy and interesting Torah that we'll just try to make relevant as much as we can with Hashem's help, and let's explore it together. So the tzaddik says over here, really Rebbe Nachman recording what he received from his Rebbe, Rebbe Nachman, writes, Sichos HaRan Zal, the following is Rebbe Nachman's teaching, Be'eshe'era Maisa B'kilas Kodesh Breslev, Shenizoika Yalda Achas B'bayis Shechafur Boy. Nebuch, it seems that there was some kind of tragedy involving a little girl in a house that had been renovated, and they dug underneath and they built some kind of structure within the house already, and Nebuch Shenizoika, a little girl got hurt because of this. And he says, Gam kamen nefashos hayu v'sakana gedola, and not only that the little girl got hurt, but there were many people that were really in a very dangerous situation because of what had happened. Says Rebbe Nachman, that's the setting. Az shamati mipiv hakadosh inyan zeh. It was at that point that we heard the following teaching from Rabbeinu HaKadosh, V'hanoira schusi haganolin v'al kol Yisrael, Amen v'Amen. Be'inyan binyanim, when it comes to building, says the Rebbe, Iyanti v'histakalti be'inyan zeh. I did a lot of thinking and contemplating and analyzing this matter, construction. V're'isi, says Rebbe Nachman, and I found shekol ha'oiskim b'minyanim u'v'chaymos ein echa mehem yotzei naki. He says whoever gets involved in construction, he says there's nobody who gets off scot-free like that, who just leaves the workplace, leaves the job, and nothing happens to him. V'afilu akam, this applies even to non-Jews. Even so, that this is the case, that it is an inherently risky kind of occupation, people build. Because people have to build. Because this is not something that we can do without. We need places to live. We need places to house the various activities of the human experience. Memela, there's necessarily going to be a desire on the part of people to be involved in binyan, to be involved with building. It says, there are many, many different distinctions and many different categories with regard to this matter of being involved in construction. But he says the sum total and the tzara shava, the common denominator among all of them, is that eni yotze naki. Says Rebbe Nachman, it's very, very likely that somebody's going to get hurt, damaged in some way from this thing called building. And perhaps this is what the Gemara in Nivamis, the Gemara in Saita tells us, Kala oisig bebinyan mismaskein. Whoever is involved in construction, mismaskein, on a pashat level means it comes along with a loss of money. Mismaskein uloshan aniyas, and that's what the Gemara means, right? Mismaskein, to become poor. But he says v'gam uloshan sakana. It's also miloshan sakana, that there's a danger there. Uva medrash mevayer, and mamish the medrash tells us this, but beferish al pasuk, on the pasuk even are miskenais lepari, that they build these cities for Pari, Pisam, and Ramses. And the Midrash says, what does this mean, miskenais? Chad oimar shemim maskenais es baleim. One says that it makes those that build it weak, poor, that there's an inyan of paucity, we lose something. And v'chad amar shemisaknois es baleim. And the other says, no, this word maskenais has the root of the word sakana. It's sakana, it's dangerous for a person to be involved in building. And the Rebbe says really the most important part of building a building is the foundation. Shekoirin zaklashchina, that they call this Ukrainian word zaklashchina. And he says it's very consequential when it comes to putting down the foundation, because you have to know when to lay the foundation, and you have to know what material to make the foundation out of, because they didn't really have concrete back then. They were building mamash, the whole thing, the whole structure out of wood. Because there are some wood, or some kinds of wood that are not fitting to be used to lay as the foundation for these buildings. But it's really impossible to know. It's really impossible to know. So before going further, what's the Rebbe saying? Of course, mukhrich, that it's talking on a simple pashit level, because that's how it's presented. The Rebbe says, if you're going to get involved in building, it's dangerous. It's just dangerous, because of course, that's the nature of building. Things aren't stable. Things aren't sturdy. Sakana, kan bonim, that's the sign that you see all over in Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, Yerushalayim habenuya, it's being fulfilled before our eyes. The Yerushalayim is being built up, many levels, but it's a sakana, because you're trying to arrange different kinds of materials that are bechina of yesh into another yesh that's radically different. You're composing something, you're putting something together, and memela, because it's an unstable environment, more often than not, things are going to come crashing down. Things are going to collapse. And it's a very risk-averse, not risk-averse, it's a very risky engagement, because of course it's very important how you build and what you build, because a building, presumably, unless you're building a sukkah, but if you're building a house, we mean for it to be a diras keva. We mean for it to be something that's stable. And a diras keva needs a yisoy, needs a foundation. And says the Rebbe, unfortunately, nobody's really, at least at that time, they weren't experts with regard to how to really lay a foundation. And I think Nebuch, based on what happened, was it last year, a year and a half ago, what happened in Miami over there, in Florida, with the collapse of the building, over there also it shows us, what do we really know? We still don't know. It's a dangerous thing to build. It's a tremendous responsibility to build. And the Rebbe says, I want to let you know that mukhrach liot, it needs to be this way, that it's going to be dangerous. But at the same time, the Rebbe says, what can you do? We have a cheshik to build, because we need building. Ki hu kiyum ha'olam. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lo l'tov bara, l'sheves yitzara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to go ahead and I want you to build the world up, to settle the world. And to settle means to have a place within which to settle. So on a pashut level, it just means physical building, a construction site. Don't walk into a makam sakana without a hard hat, and make sure that you know what you're doing and where you're going, because building is dangerous. But I would like to suggest that the Rebbe is trying to communicate to us something beyond the surface as well. I don't know if some of you saw, because I didn't really post it on LPI, because it's like more of a niche kind of writing, but I posted on Facebook and in some other things, a very lengthy essay that nobody asked for. You know, it's like this meme, like nobody, and then like Yaakov Klein decides to write an 8-page essay that nobody asked for. But it's fine, you know, hopefully if one or two chaver read it, but it was really just to get it off my chest and out of my head. And it's a certain gilui, you know, when you have a maracha in your brain and you're able to put it into words, it's a certain simcha. So I really didn't write it that people should read it. I just wrote it because that's what my neshama wants to do. Al kol panim, to those that are following this series and also had however long it takes to read that long Torah Megillah over there, you'll remember that part of it at least was founded on a Sichos HaRan shiur that we gave I think 2 weeks ago, where we spoke about death. Remember? We spoke about the Rebbe's sort of transformation from the beginning of his life when he was very fearsome of death to the end where he sort of took a much, much lighter, almost like a scornful stance at death. And we spoke about the Rebbe's optimism being born dafka in a place where he recognizes the tragic nature of living, and like we said, we called it the absurd, right, in that article over there. Just an important thing. I think that this also sort of ties into that a little bit. Because over here also the Rebbe is just, it's mamish like realist commentary. He's not judging. He's not saying, the Rebbe is not putting forth a shita over here. The Rebbe is just saying, this is the fact of life. And mamish, if you're being basbainin, because I made a reference to Koheles in that article, the Rebbe mamish uses the word that Koheles uses again and again. Re'isi Koheles says, I looked at the world re'isi, that everything's hevel, re'isi. It's just sort of like a disengaged bikoret, just analyzing what is and just reporting the facts as we see them, without trying to twist them, without trying to find meaning in them. Just, it is what it is. Says the Rebbe, I am under no illusion that building in this world is a risky thing. I'm not building buildings. Any kind of creative act or acts, whether it's raising children, whether it's building a marriage, whether it's investing in a friendship, whether it's building an organization, whether it's putting effort into a new parnasa so that we can build our homes properly. Whatever kind of building you may be engaged with, says the Rebbe, I want to let you know, Meirosh, it's a sakana. And all of us know that it's a sakana. Crazily enough, there's actually, it's even crazy to even say, but there is a trend within certain, it's rooted in certain philosophies, but even just socially. You can even Google this, there are websites about this, advocating for people to not have children anymore. Stop bringing children into the world, they say. Why? Because look at our world, right? Whether if you believe like global warming is mamish imminent, like we're headed for disaster. So why bring children into the world? This is the shita. Chas v'shalom. This is the shita. Consider it ki'ilu an act of cruelty to bring a neshama down to the world because of what it's going to need to be subjected to, and how much pain and how much suffering we experience in life. But the Rebbe says, I want you to know, I'm not pretending that everything's hunky-dory and that everything's okay and that everything's fine. Because the Rebbe was never one to do that. The Rebbe says, Ein af echad, what's his lashon over here? He says, nobody gets off. Nobody gets out without being damaged. Ach soiv kol soiv eina yoytze naki. But at the end of the day, the afal pikin hoylom oiskin b'zeh. The Rebbe says, don't let that stop you from building. Don't let that stop you. Of course, we have to be a little bit foolish to think that I'm mamish, okay, after Yom Kippur, I'm going to be a malach. From now on, mamish a malach. Let's be honest. You know what's the most beautiful of all chazals, the Kotzker Rebbe speaks about very strongly? Adam Rishon, after eating from the tree, says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least the Medrash says, Achalti, I ate from the tree, va'oichel. And he says, and I'm telling you now, I'm going to continue eating. That's what he says. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I just want to be open with you. I ate from the tree, and in all likelihood, even after tshuva, I'm going to continue eating from the tree. And the Kotzker Rebbe says, that's good because that's emes. Be honest. Be honest. It's true. The Piasetzer Rebbe says there are some times where we have to lift ourselves above ourselves and strive on an even deeper level, on an even higher level. That's true. But sof kol sof, in a moment of honesty, all of us know we're human. At the end of the day, we're humans. Sach hakol, we're humans. And we understood what last year in Kippur looked like and what the next moment looked like. And we know what had happened the next year and all of the years of our lives. Eini yotze naki. But the Rebbe says, did you ever see anybody or any generation decide to stop building because of this simple cheshbon that building is a risky thing to do? Not once. Never. Ki hu kiyam ha'olam. And it's a gewaldige chizek. It's a gewaldige chizek. Because if the Rebbe would go on to say, and therefore I don't want my Hasidim to get involved in building at all. It doesn't say this. The Rebbe just reports the facts. I'm letting you know Meirosh, difficulties, challenges, failures, even getting a scrape and even banging your thumb with a hammer. It's to be expected. But at the same time, with all the dangers involved, ki hu kiyam ha'olam. I want to let you know that your mom is building the world when you build, and your mom is manifesting the creativity of the Ein Sof. When we engage in building, af al pi, that we understand that building is an inherently risky thing to engage in. That's maybe a little bit what's going on beyond the surface. Because, like Chazal said, if you do Sichos HaRan, Shatim Chachamim, Tzrichem Limud. Afal Pikein, Alachas Kama V'Kama, rather, that it's Mamish Torah, Tzrichem Limud. And I think maybe this is a deeper level of understanding and a way to make it more applicable to our circumstances. Okay, so before we go weiter, we're going to start with Vegama She'en Gedelim Peiros. Before we do that, let's just jump to this teaching from Chaim HaRan that's related to that segment of Sichos HaRan Samach. And the Rebbe over here says, Da, Shal Yidei Mitzvah Sukkah Kara'oi Mutar Le'lasek B'Binyan Ve'ina Mazik Le, L'Mamoinai. Through engaging in the mitzvah of sukkah, then it's mamish totally okay to be engaged in building. The enamazikloi doesn't have to worry about any damage. Lemamoinai to his money. Ki amar Rabbi Yisrael Zichron Livracha, because Chazal say in Yivamas that a oisik b'binyan mismaske, which we just learned means not only that it's dangerous physically, that you could get hurt, but that, or rather, that's the Rebbe's parish. But the Gemara says you become poor from this. What's the kesher between building and then bringing poverty upon oneself? The Rebbe explains, because a person who builds a house, it's very important, like we said before, because it's such an important thing to have a house, to build some place that you can mamish stay, that you could settle, that you could live, that it's kayam, that it's keva, kavua. It's a very, very crucial thing. It needs to be built with chachma. Kamashikasav bechachma yibane bayis. Bazig Mishlei says you need to build a bayis with chachma. Ubevadei abayna bechachma liyismaskein. So a person building a house with chachma is not gonna lose because of this. If he knew he was gonna lose, he wouldn't engage in building it. But adar abi yisasher, the yiskayim by the chachma yibane bayis. Adar abba. If you build with chachma, so not only won't you lose, you'll gain a tremendous amount. As the pasuk says, it continues of a das chadarim yimalu. That if you build the house with chachma, so then of a das, because you connected with this concept of das, of intellect, and you put thought into it, and you did it carefully, chadarim yimalu. So you're going to have storehouses filled with treasures. But if the building is engaged with, without any level of planning or chachma miroish, that specifically should come because of our awareness of how risky it is to build. It's risky. Okay, so I'm not jumping into it. Good, battle plans. B'chachma yibane bayis. So we need chachma first. The Rebbe was saying, even with chachma, still be aware that it's again an inherently unstable environment. But that's life. That life is an inherently unstable environment. The Kadosh Baruch Hu put us here not to escape from it, to be here and to understand that it's unstable and that this is where we're supposed to build. And if like Pisam and Ram says, all of our buildings sink into the earth, okay, that's not my business. I'm doing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do. He says to go ahead and have a Yom Kippur and to promise everything in the world. I'm having a Yom Kippur and I'm promising everything in the world. The next morning I wake up and all the buildings that I just built over the last day sink into the ground. Okay, so then I have mincha to stand up and to try to fix things again, and then mariv, and then shachris, and then mincha, and so on and so forth as the days turn into nights and the nights turn into days, and life carries on, right? Because that's like we already learned. Remember about the person that was complaining to the Rebbe that he's forgetting everything he learned. The Rebbe said, "You're getting paid just to put the Torah in, not to make sure that it stays there. Your job is to do what you can with as much confidence and courage and thought as you can muster to plan. There's a risk. Okay, so you try to plan. But if we're coming ahead to engage in this thing called building, whether it means al pi pshutai to mamish build a house, but there's no proper blueprint, so then memela you're going to leave with a chisaron, with a loss, having lost more than you gain. The intellect of the pauper is bazui. That's not called chachma. And so a person who, because we didn't invest strongly enough in the chachma necessary to engage in building with as much opportunity to really succeed as we possibly can, we're going to end up with chachmas hamiskein, which is the person that experiences poverty because he didn't build with chachma. So whatever level chachma he thinks he had, it's bezuya. Mida connected mida. The sukkah is connected to the concept of Torah, kaniskala el, as he was saying previously in this teaching. And the Torah is mamish the source of all chachmais in the world. If a person's connected to the concept of sukkah, this is so deep, to get to in a minute what the aimek is, so then he's okay. That itself is chachma. The siman ladavar, the Yaakov nasa sukhaisa, says the Yaakov Avinu traveled to Sukkot vayiven, and he built. He built enclosements for his family, and for his miknah he built sukkos. Right, the pasuk continues. Vayiven. Says the Rebbe, what's the remez? V'Yaakov nasa sukhaisa vayiven. Okay, so it must be telling us that if we're zoichet to the madriga of sukkah, which we'll get to in a minute, what that means by Oimek, then vayiven, then you could taka build, because sukkah is connected to chachma, because sukkah is connected to Torah. Huter loy live nice. Huter loy live nice. Al yidei mitzvah sukkah, which is Yaakov nasa sukhaisa, then vayiven. Huter loy live nice. It's okay to build. Leiv is Rosh Tevis loy bayis, right? Because it says vayiven loy bayis. He built a bayis for himself. Loy bayis is Rosh Tevis leiv, and leiv is the Torah, which begins with the letter beis, bereshis, and ends with the letter lamed, le'ine kol Yisrael, hainu klal HaTorah. So that teaches us that where did he get the bechina of sukkis, which is chachma? He got that from vayiven loy bayis. It's a loy bayis with a vav, lamed vav, and then bayis, lamed beis. Lamed beis is bereshis, and le'ine kol Yisrael is kol HaTorah kula. I want to suggest something very deep. And I thank you all for joining and for learning with me, for keeping me company, and all of us keep each other warm in the winter. It's unbelievable. What is chus? I want to suggest like this. What kind of chachma is the Rebbe talking about? What kind of chachma is the Rebbe talking about over here that's connected to the concept of sukkos, which itself is a bechina of Torah? Leaving the Ramazim aside for a second, just the concepts. Torah, sukkah, chachma. That would enable a person to engage in building. Where the Rebbe says, muter loy lasik. In our Torah in Sichos HaRan, the Rebbe didn't say it's usher to build. Build. Everybody should build. Everybody needs to build. Everybody, it's kiyum ha'olam. Everybody has a cheshek to build. But nobody gets out of it scot-free. But we build. I want to suggest that the chachma that enables a person to engage in building is minei ubei, the aspect of sukkos, which is itself the aspect of Torah. That is the chachma that enables a person to build. What's the big chachma of sukkah? Sukkah is diras arai. Sukkah is diras arai. The sukkah is not made to last. Can't tell you how deep this is. The sukkah is not built to last. The whole premise of the sukkah needs to be dira, and right, halachically we have all the different dinim as to it needs to be a dira, but a diras arai, we're going to take it down. Not made with a consciousness of enabling it to last. There are two kinds of building in this world. There's a kind of building that's disjointed from the Torah, which sees this world as a diras keva and takes building so seriously that the moment that something starts to fall apart, it's mamish the end of the world. And the hezek that we could experience from that is immense and is ultimate. And then there's a kind of building in this world that's connected to the Torah, which is the consciousness to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need me to build something for eternity. He just needs me to build in this moment, irrespective of how quickly things come crashing down. Zelo mishaneh. Says the Rebbe, if you have the chachma of sukkos, which is the chachma of Torah, which is the chachma of leiv, meaning it's the wisdom of experience just in this moment without planning big chaloimus for the future. Live in this moment and build with the awareness that it's likely things won't work out. Zelo mishaneh, it doesn't bother me. Then the Rebbe says, mutar lelasik b'binyan. Then build. And you know something? If you engage with building with this kind of chachma, b'chachma yibane bayis, with this kind of chachma, then you're going to end up far more successful than the chaver that engage in building with a diras keva kind of consciousness, where it ends up, even though on one level, we've spoken about this before, on one level they take the world much more seriously, they end up being far less successful with building anything in this world of kiyum than the chaver that don't take this world so seriously. That's what we spoke about with regard to death. Remember? We said if we don't take living so seriously, then we mamish take living very seriously. And we're able to succeed. We spoke about this, not getting into the depth of it now. Maybe this is a little bit some of the omek of what's happening over here, what the Rebbe is telling us with Shaykhis, Sukkah, Taira. What's this whole thing? This chaver is the chachma that itself enables us to engage in binyan and grants us the chance or the likelihood of achieving success. A greater success than if we were to engage in building with the consciousness of a diras keva, of assuming and expecting things to work out. And engaging in building with the consciousness that we're doing this because we are building something. Says the Rebbe, no, you're not building anything. You are living this moment. That's what you're doing. Without any consideration for what might happen tomorrow, what happened yesterday. That is the task of the Jew, because past and future are an illusion. All there is now. That is all there is. And even if you experienced something yesterday or last week, you didn't experience it in the past. You experienced it in the now of then, which is a very different thing. There is no past. There is just a series of now. That's all there is. Then, you are also living in the now of then. There is no past, there is no future. There's just this moment. And that's tshuva, say Chazal, ein va'ata elaloshen tshuva. That's the portal to tshuva. If I can detach myself from this kind of illusion, then I mamish have to build something in this causal way, or this cumulative way, one beam on top of another beam on top of another beam. That will happen. Of course that will happen. Of course we want to build a bias. Of course we want to attain madrigas. Of course we want to go kiseder. That's not a question. But I don't have to be conscious of the whole thing and have my eye on the big palace as I build brick on top of brick on top of brick. And if a brick falls, it's okay. Take another brick and put it on. And if we do this, says the Rebbe, mutar lelasik b'binyan ve'eina mazik le, you're going to get to a far, far further place than if we would have held on so stubbornly to needing everything, the whole palace. Because then we're going to give up. Because bricks will fall. Because ein yoytze naki. And that's the nature of this world. It's a very, very deep Torah. It's a very, very deep Torah. Hope to make it a little bit relevant. Weiter. Why is it that fruits don't grow in Ukraine in the same way that they grow in Spain, and that different fruits grow in Eretz Yisrael, that they don't grow in, I don't know, certain other places, right? In Milwaukee, maybe, I don't know. Right? Why is it that fruits grow in certain places but don't grow in other places? Because there are certain fruits that just don't grow in certain climates, because they need a certain kind of atmosphere. Because there are certain things that we just don't know. We don't know where to plant and how to plant and what to do. That's called being human. That's fine. That's also part of the consciousness of humility. To understand, sachakol, you're a human being. There are going to be things that it's not your fault, that you just don't know. But that doesn't stop you from planting. It doesn't stop you from planting. And the Rebbe says, he goes into the depth of it over here, Ki Even Shasiya, because we should know that there's a foundation stone. Shemimenu hushsas ha'olam, it's called Even Shasiya, because Chazal say, Shemimenu, from that stone, hushsas, which means the proliferated ha'olam, the whole world, sort of grew out of this stone. Visham yoitzim gidim l'chal ha'aratzis, and from there, says the Rebbe, which is really based on a medrash, which he says from Kelas Rabbah, from there, veins spread from this Eben Shasiya that travel around the entire globe. Physical veins, spiritual pipelines, veins. Just like veins carry blood, these veins carry Shefa from the Eben Shasiya, which is the heart of the world, of course, underneath the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is Kol Echad, right, should be Mechaven Liboy Keneged Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, like the Nefesh HaChaim says, that just like the Kodesh HaKadoshim is, to the world what the heart of a person is to his heart. Just like the heart of a person has veins from which, or through which, blood flows from the heart to the whole body, so too the Eben Shasiya, which is positioned under the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is the heart of the world, has veins extending from it all across the globe, carrying spiritual Shefa, life force, to saturate the whole world with vitality, with vibrancy. Ushloima HaMelech alav hashalom, and he says that Shloima HaMelech sheyachacham gadal v'yada kol hagidim epratius, that Shloima HaMelech did know. He was able to trace all of the different veins to know exactly where they went and how they passed through different lands, different places of the lands. He mamish knew this chachma. The Medrash tells us hayayneitea eitz kol pri. He was able to plant any kind of pri anywhere because he was able to identify the exact veins that are flowing forth from the Eben Shasiya that correspond to this kind of plant, to that kind of plant, to the other kind of plant, as the Medrash tells us. V'gam b'medinas halalu. And the Rebbe says, I want to let you know the same is true, even for Ukraine. If we would really know this chachma, to be able to trace and to track all the different veins as they flow through every land, we could also plant, just have to know exactly where it is. Even though this, vein, as it were, that passes through this particular land is the most advantageous for a certain kind of plant. I think the export in Ukraine, as we've been reading, is wheat, I think, right? That's their main thing, I think. At the end of the day, there's a mixture that happens among the veins, and so if you know exactly a certain place, over there you could plant whatever you'd like. If you would only plant the seed a few feet away, never know. You would be able to plant an esrog tree in the middle of Siberia. You never know. It also has to do with water. We don't know where the different waters come from and the different energies within the water. If they would open up a certain well in a certain place, then near that they could plant a different kind of tree. You never know. And you have to know also the nature, not just of the veins, but what's the matzav or the state of the Eben Shasiya at any given moment in time, because it changes. What kind of, just like the heart, sometimes it beats fast, sometimes it beats slowly, so different kinds of states that the heart exists in, the same thing with the Eben Shasiya. What level it's on. So there's so many deep wisdoms that Shlomo HaMelech knew that we don't even know what we don't know, what there is to know about this world. It's so deep. He says it's very hidden. Because the Rebbe said that there are certain things that we must not reveal. It's not that there is, that wisdom doesn't exist. It exists. It's not for public consumption. Why? Because the matter is as follows. Because the world says that as generations go on, the generations are getting wiser and wiser and wiser. Because look, we're the ones that have this kind of advanced technology of VR and all these different things going on today that previous generations didn't have. So it must be that we're wiser. And because we get fooled by our technological acumen, we memela start to look down on the moral visions of the previous generations. But the Rebbe says it's all not true. The previous generations were much bigger chachamim than we are. So then why didn't they come up with the iPhone? Because veheim gilu ikar hachacham. They were the ones that revealed the foundational principles upon which everybody else came and made a yesh from another yesh. But they were being Isaac in an aspect of yesh me'ayin. They were coming up with the theories and the principles and inventing the wheel, as it were, that would then enable somebody to have a car. But a big chachma. But the chachma of a car is just in all of the additions that you can make it go by itself. You can make it comfortable, and you can make it efficient. You can make it this and that, and go this far and over this terrain. Okay, but they were the ones that actually came up with the concept of a wheel that can transport something from one place to another place easily. That's a much bigger chachma, because that's an essential chachma. So it's keilu they prepared all the ingredients. And then the later generations came and made those ingredients into a cake. But what was a bigger kunz? Right? What was a bigger chiddush? The ingredients themselves. We were born into a world where everything was already muchan for us. They discovered electricity and they figured out how to channel it and this and that. Okay, so it's a big chachma. Now I plug my a plug into the outlet and it charges a phone. Right? Everything was muchan for us already. They were the ones that revealed the ikra chachma. So all we need to do is invest just a little bit, and we're able to build on all the different generations of trial and error and of the scientific method and all these different things, and we're able to reach far further. But it's a humbling thing to realize we're not as great as we think we are in that respect. And of course, this is true for the specificity of ethics and morality and worldview and perspective, because the same shita. Those people were archaic. They didn't understand anything about the world. What did they know about A, B, C, or D? And you know something? Maybe you're right. Maybe they didn't actually know about A, B, C, or D because that wasn't their actual social experience. That kind of behavior or those abilities to engage in certain behaviors just weren't in their reality, so they didn't address it. But that doesn't mean that you know more. And that doesn't mean that you know better. Because we need to realize what we're building on and what kind of people came before us. That they were the ones that put the ingredients on the counter, and then we with our hubris come, mix them all together and bake a cake, and then we just forget about whoever prepared the ingredients in the first place. The Gemara says, which I believe means if they hadn't uncovered the earthenware, you wouldn't have known to dig under there to find the gold, right? But meaning you were 2 steps removed. So you're right, they only uncovered a chaspa. They only uncovered an earthenware. But that's how you knew how to dig deeper and find the treasure. V'alkein, therefore, afal pisha koidem le'pal klal, even though initially those generations weren't able to mamish come to the full expression of what they had begun to discover, because of course the main thing is the diamond, but the main thing is what they did. They were the ones that uncovered the foundations, and the primary principles and the axiomatic foundations for wisdom. That later generations came, we built upon what they tirelessly put incredible effort into building, and then we built something. Al-Kain, says Rebbe Nachman, because this is the way that things develop, aside from the message that's there, that's just humbling, to put us in our place a little bit and help us recognize, our position against the backdrop of history. But the Rebbe says, because this is the pattern, that's why there are things that are usher to be megala. Because if we would reveal certain things, even though they might be things that are good and that are mutter, somehow, if we don't present them properly, or just because of like broken telephone, the way that things aren't always transmitted with the full nuance of the matter, it can come to, at a later time, it can come to an inyan of avodah zarah. because there are things that need to be developed. They can go and develop from this principle. They could turn it into something that was a very, 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 very different. Because we're constantly gaining in our intellect. And as we do so, we're becoming more and more ego-oriented because of our quote-unquote success and how proud we are of ourselves. And Mamela, our perspective becomes about, okay, how can I use wisdom, or how can I use different capacities within the world for my own benefit, for my own gain. And if we were to reveal certain things that quote-unquote, they work, they taka work, later generations could take that essentially good thing and turn it into something that we never dreamed could come from it. And that's why just stam, because it's not so good, it's not so possible all the time. It's also one of the things that we einam yoidim, because we're humans. We don't always know. So what can I say and what can't I say? And we need to say. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that we should say. We should say Torah. We should share ideas. We should hold on to things. We should commit to Yiddishkeit deeply. We should share things that are meaningful to us, that are meaningful to others. Hashem wants that we should say. So the Eitzah Tova Kamashmalan, and this is something really that I try to be careful about, and I hope that I'm Zeicha on some level to succeed, but there's always more to grow, is to contextualize what we say. To make sure always to contextualize. So say, but always put things in the right kli. Because you never know who's listening, and you never know how people hear things. You have to be sensitive when you speak to a lot of people. You have to be very, very sensitive to realize, okay, it's coming out from your brain the way that you perceive it, but you sort of have to try as much as you can to take different people's experiences into account, because it's very easy for you to say one thing and mean one thing, and then somebody else can take that and turn it into something that you never dreamed, and you never know, like the Rebbe is saying, you never know what that could turn into. And so again, the Rebbe is not saying, okay, so therefore don't be Megala anything ever. Be Megala. But be Megala carefully. Be Megala with nuance. Be Megala with the emes of Aleph, Mem, Taf, from beginning to end, a whole picture. Don't just give little snippets, snapshots, sound bites, a little thing where you said one time. No. Every time you say anything, say everything. Always be careful to present the all of a thing. Be clear, define your terms, be very, very specific with regard to what you intend to say. Very important. Very important. Aside from the fact that the Rebbe is saying that in later generations, forget that, for a minute, forget that. In the present, we spoke about the present, just in terms of who's listening, it's very, very important to speak precisely, clearly, to try. So that's what the Rebbe says over here. As is brought down about Arla, which of course is a tumah, right? The fruits of the third year. For those first 3 years, the Zohar Kodesh says that there's a klipa, it's Arla, on the tree, on the fruits of those trees. Klipa. And because the Zohar, he's almost saying like the Zohar made a mistake. I don't know how to really read this, but he says that because that was revealed into the world, which Reb Shimon Bar Yochai did, that they made use of this because they knew that there was some koyach here, and maybe it wasn't communicated clearly enough that this was a koyach that we needed to stay away from, and they jumped all in and they started to channel it l'ra, because this is what could happen. This is what could happen, and that's why just li'inyanenu, because this is a shiur on a Breslov text, and because all of us know that Breslov is very, very broad, and there are a lot of people with different approaches within Breslov and different things like this, and of course, the only way to for sure lose a lottery is never to play. Right? That's the surest way to lose a lottery, is never to play. And there's only one way to win a lottery, and that's if you buy a ticket, which of course comes along with risk. And this is not my mashal. The Ishbitzer says this, that it's true for Ruchnius as well. We take a risk. when we learn Rabbeinu HaKadosh. We take a risk with the inyan of the tzaddik, right? We take a risk. Because it's far less risky, as it were, to stay away from any of these things that sniff, that smell to the uninitiated. It could sound like not quote unquote mainstream Yiddishkeit, because Nebuch, other religions came and they usurped ideas and they turned them into caricatures, right? And so to the untrained mind, the inyan of the tzaddik mamash sounds like, I don't even want to say what, but everybody knows, Ameving Yavin. Even though we know what the role of the tzaddik is, and that we don't serve the tzaddik, and we don't speak, daven to the tzaddik, even though we go to a caver, and we don't put picture. Okay, there is no picture of Rebbe Nachman, but that's not what we're mamish. We know that the tzaddik is a shtick bittel, and all the tzaddik is mavur and Torah ayin and Likutei Moharan, and it's something that we've learned about in the past. The whole inyan of the tzaddik, Torah ayin, is this nekuda, where the whole thing of the tzaddik is that he's just a channel, he's a vacuum. He is not. He's only important in as much as his eitzes help bring us not close to him, but close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know all of this. The Rebbe is almost whispering to us, be very careful with me. Be very, very careful with the way that you speak. Because even if you know what you mean, be aware that there are other people who pashut hear what you're saying in a completely different way that you never intended, but it's still your responsibility to look out for it, to be careful for it. So speak passionately about tzaddikim, speak passionately about the tzaddik emes, and about everything. We believe in it. More than we believe in it, we felt what it does for us. We know the way that it's transformative, the way that it speaks to our heart, the way that it guides us, the way that it makes us feel okay, the way that everything. We know it. Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'moshe avdeh. We believe in the tzaddik. But when we speak about the concept of the tzaddik to others, and there's just one mashal, but I mean across the board, any kind of these ideas, we have to present it with the full picture and the nuance that it requires. Because we don't want to be guilty, chas v'shalom, even though we're well-meaning, of this kind of thing, and it's something that I've seen. It is something that I've seen. That sometimes the ways that certain individuals speak, with the best of intention, actually ends up hurting far more than it helps. Because sometimes our passion can be interpreted as extremism. And I'm speaking from personal experience, by the way, because I'm a very passionate guy, extremely, and I've become more sensitive over time to being careful and measured so that I'm not guilty, chas v'sholem, of quote-unquote turning people off from the very thing that I intend to draw them close to. L'ha'ir. Just something to be aware of, and I'm really speaking primarily just to myself, but just something to keep in mind, right? An example, sure, we could give an example. I think that we sort of already speaking about the concept of the tzaddik, right? The importance of the tzaddik, or how important Rebbe Nachman could be for a person, or any of the tzaddikim. Let's say Rebbe Nachman specifically, because he was the one that spoke the most about the tzaddik. So you want to tell a person, mamish, you're wasting your time if you're not learning the Rebbe, and you must, and there's no Rosh Hashanah like the Rebbe's Rosh Hashanah, and if you're not an Uman, it's like you didn't have Rosh Hashanah, and all of these different things that within the Breslov circles, okay, you get it because you understand what it means and how Rebbe Nachman meant certain things that he says. But if you're just going to go and start blasting that out to the public, whoa, then you can fortify the caricatured image that many people have of Breslov as a bunch of extremists who are outside the mainstream of Yiddishkeit, and all they do all day is speak about a person instead of speaking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'chulei v'chahena, which is of course the opposite of what we mean, right? And so that's why that's just one example that I'm bringing, because it's relevant to our circumstances. Another example that comes to mind is the discussion about Yediyah and Bechira, without getting into the whole thing now. But there are certain streams within Hasidus, for example, in Ishbitz, in Reb Tzaddik, which is also, of course, a hemshech of Ishbitz. Even in Sfas Emes, you find this a little bit, and in others, the Marinayim, you find this idea that the ultimate point of tshuva is when we realize that even the chet, was actually the will of Hashem. Crazy thing. Right? And Chazal already say that in the place where the Baal Tshuva stands, even the biggest tzaddikim can't reach. Because in some sense, the Aveira gets you even higher. Something like that, right? Now, when I mentioned that concept in the story of our lives, I was very nervous about it, about even speaking about it. For those of the Chaver that remember, it's the symbol of the golden mountain. I was very, very careful. And I spent a lot of pages over there in chapter 16 and 17 making sure that it would be impossible for a person to make the fatal error of walking away and thinking that a sin is not so bad, as it were. Because I could just do tshuva and then it will show that I was forced to do the sin. Hashem wanted me. I made very, 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 very clear exactly the appropriate approach, because it's emes, but if it's given over without gedarim, it could mamish turn into the biggest sheker in the world, and it can mamish, instead of helping people, it could be mamish destructive for people, and that's not what we don't want to do that. So it's just, we have to be careful. That's all. Just have to be careful. That's what the Rebbe is sort of hinting at over here. Something to be careful. And he continues with this example of Arla, right? As they know, and they turned this evil, negative power, as it were, and they turned it into an avodah zarah. That they were mamish serving it because they misread, or because it wasn't clarified clearly enough, and because it wasn't presented with balance and with clarity and with details, so that nobody can err and nobody can make a mistake. Okay, and therefore, these are not things that we speak about for fear of what they could turn into. But again, we don't really know what yeah and what not. Certainly within the realm of what Rebbe Nachman himself revealed, which is the koyach of tzaddikim and the importance of connecting with them and iskashrus of tzaddikim and so on and so forth. Of course, we have every right, and more than a right. We should absolutely do our part, like we always say, to serve as a conduit for other people. It's not just about us, but to pass on whatever of value we find in Yiddishkeit. I'm sure there are other people that could also benefit from that. So share it. Not a question. Don't hold back. It's not that would also be a misunderstanding of what the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is not saying hold back. The Rebbe says, even though we already learned in the beginning about binyanim, you know that it's possible that it's gonna lead to a damage. Build, share, but to be conscious and aware that being misunderstood is a very, very, very great probability. And therefore, we learned we need to build in every way that we can think of, whatever that means to build. Do your best, and I'm telling myself to do my best, to try to share things with balance, clarity, nuance, to be very, very specific about what I mean and what we don't mean. And not just even in a moment of great passion and excitement, start to just burst things out into the world. I'll just close one nakuda. I'll just close with a story that Rebbe Nachman, when he came to Rebbe Nachman in the beginning, I believe it was Torah Vav that he heard. I think either it was Torah Vav or it was one of the early lessons that he heard from Rebbe Nachman. He was so mind blown that he started running out into the streets and yelling on top of his lungs, "Don't you people know what we have here? Where are you? What are you doing? Don't you people know?" And the Rebbe, it's brought down Chaim HaRan, the Rebbe stood behind Rebbe Nachman and he held him like this with his hands. The Mamish held him physically and he whispered into his ear, "Lo zu haderech." This is not the way. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll leave me with that. I think that Baruch Hashem, it seems that we were able to mine this otherwise pretty, seemingly somewhat irrelevant, or it's less relevant in some of Rebbe Nachman's other teachings. But I think the relevance is immense for our lives. In terms of the chizuk of realizing, even when we build, a brick's going to fall here and there, it's fine. Go in with that chachma Our job is not to build a diras keva. Our job is to build a little bit of a sukkah. Our job is to focus on the present, to do the best that we can. Bricks fall, we get a little bump, we get hurt. That's to be expected. Don't let that discourage you. Your job is to build. Your job is not to complete the building. Build. Loi alecha hamalacha ligmar. That's not our job. But we're not reshai lihibatel mimena. We need to build. That's what the Mishnah Avis tells us. And then we learned about this nekuda of plants. It's very, very interesting about the Evangelia. And if we would know, we could know where to plant. And then how to be megala certain things with balance, nuance, and in a very delicate way. Being very conscious of the way that our words might be perceived. Adkan. Torah Samach, Sichos HaRan, in Sichos HaRan, and now we move into the 60s. Chazi Hashem, the wild 60s of Sichos HaRan, B'siyata D'Shmaya. What a privilege to learn this sefer with you. And I just want to express further gratitude, in addition to all of you for coming and learning with me, whether you're here on Zoom or on Facebook, or whether you're going to be listening to the shiur afterwards. It's a big deal to have started a series and maintained this. To get to the 60th teaching, it's a big nekuda. It's a lot of shiur. That's a lot of teachings. That's a lot of learning, and that's a lot of commitment. And so I want to just appreciate all of you who are sticking with this, and it's just a privilege. And so I want to express gratitude to you and on our collective behalf to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and thank Him for this wisdom, and thank Him for this tzaddik who HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent to this world, not for us to become obsessed with Him, meaning the tzaddik, but for us to be able to find the path upon which we feel comfortable walking closer and closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you all for joining. Wishing you the most phenomenal week. I hope we'll see you Thursday night for our Shabbos shiur. And if you've noticed, I sent out earlier today, with this will end, I sent out a 2-part series. It's a new series, a small chabur that we have here. It's not live on Zoom. We're trying to keep it very private and intimate. It's a certain chevra. And we're going to be learning Likutei Moharan, which I haven't done for a long time. And so those shiurim, you'll find them. They're going to be on SoundCloud. Sometimes I'll share them. Sometimes maybe I won't, because there's a lot of conversation. And so I'm not sure it's fit for public consumption. But if you are interested in joining the Chabura, I sent out the links to the first 2, which is its own contained mini-series into our Lametes and Tinyana. And we're going to be continuing with that. So if you have access to the SoundCloud, you can follow along with all the shiur in that way. And we can continue learning together in great joy and confidence and peace of mind, which is the most important. Okay, l'chaim l'vracha chavra, thank you so much for joining, and wishing everybody, thank you, Ashreinu, thank you all. Wishing everybody the most amazing day. Kol tov, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.